All right. Okay. Welcome back to Roundtable. Today, Steve, Danny, and I are going to go through structuring accessories, both on season and off season, and differences in what our little philosophies and how we structure accessories as a group and then individually, and what that looks like for the lifter in their different types of performance, where they are in their performance. So, Danny, when you're structuring accessories from the start, how do you like to look at it when you like, let's just say you've got a new athlete that comes to you, you know nothing about them. What's the type of things that you do, or do you have any layouts that you like to use straight away with your accessories and your micro?
Yeah. So my rationale for like thinking of putting accessories in the first place is all to supplement squat, bench, and deadlift, right? Especially for powerlifters. So therefore, we're going to need some sort of squat movement, some sort of horizontal pressing, and some sort of hinging, right? So if we can add those three in, then it's likely to transfer into SBD if we get stronger at those things. So horizontal press, like as a whole, I think of movements that don't generate a large amount of like axial fatigue as a result, because we don't want it to mess with the main lifts in the program. So things that are very low fatigue, but you're still able to load it up quite easily. So most movements that I do pick for accessories to strengthen up those movements should be set up in a way that's stable, easy to load, and it's like convenient to set up. Because worst thing for people when they see something in an accessory is like if it's hard to set up and things like that, and they don't do it, and it's hard to progress it from then on. So that's my first step when I figure out putting an accessory in. Is it if it's worth it to put into load? Another thing as well after that is like, aside from SBD, most powerlifters don't have any like rolling work, like vertical pulling, horizontal pulling, vertical pressing. All those movements kind of go out the window. However, like there's still movements that can help maintain some sort of range of motion competencies as well. So outside of the main lifts and those respective movements, the other ones are kind of there to kind of keep the overall body healthy. Because if we start losing too much range of motion, then like the body will just tend to come up with like niggles and pains and things like that.
Get injured.
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you have like a structure that you could use? So let's just say someone comes to you and they're like, I can only train 4 days a week. Do you have a structure with your accessories that you would use other than that doesn't create fatigue and can help? Do you get what I mean? So let's just say they can do 4 days a week, you know, they want to bench 3 times a week, squat twice and deadlift twice.
Yeah. You could do something like an upper lower split. So you're like recovering upper body while you're training the lower body. But in most of my programs, it's like sprinkled in between something like full body throughout the whole week without overly stressing one body type.
Definitely.
Like one target muscle area.
Yeah, I think that's a big one with powerlifting. I don't know if you agree, Steve. I think sometimes I see programs and they're very much upper lower body split, and then you end up not training one part of the body for a whole week in between. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I sprinkled it all out. The other thing too that Danny didn't touch on is like programming some unilateral work as well.
Yeah.
You know, powerlifting so bilateral in itself that everything that we do is actual load, like Danny said, and we don't get to move unilateral at all. So just programming that to keep someone moving and, you know, evening out things at the same time as well.
Yeah, definitely. What are some things you guys look out for when you're first meeting with someone? So let's just say you've never met this one before, you've got to do their accessories. What are some heuristics about the people that you look at before you even start?
You got to make sure that they can perform the accessories that you put out, right? Because some accessories that we do give people are pretty advanced. Like think, for example, like dips. Not everyone can do a dip.
Yeah.
Not everyone, like equipment, people don't have the right equipment sometimes. Like if you're going to give someone a belt squat and they don't have it, and they end up having to make it like makeshift, like that's terrible. But like on the whole, I don't think individualization like changes much for exercise selection for accessories, because like I said, if everyone's goals are like get stronger as well as like maintain movement competency, like all the exercises are very similar, and then it'll come down to like preference as well. as long as you're ticking those two boxes and you're able to train it over time, like I don't think exercise selection changes as a whole too much.
No,
Okay.
not off the bat, it doesn't. I think as we go through and work with someone longer, we start to see, you know, the way that their body organizes itself and the way that it moves, you know, through the powerlifting movements, that we need to be like, okay, this person needs to have more hinging movement in their program. So this person will have, you know, hinging maybe on multiple days rather than it just being on that one day to induce more hinging, like you said earlier. Whereas, you know, then we got someone that hinges really well, so we don't need to program as much. They might just have 3 sets or something extra a week. But then we've got someone like myself at the moment who's got hinging on like 3 or 4 days, just because I literally like struggle. I'm so far under that I can't go back.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that, Steve. Once you are getting someone past that level, they have non-negotiables that have to be in that program. So keep going.
And to the level that they need it at specifically. So it's just like, if we look at the how we would program the dosage of squat, bench, and deadlift for an individual, it becomes kind of the same for accessories in the non-negotiables.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I do find that because I've got one lifter who's quite tall, I've found it really hard to program accessories that have hit the mark well with Sam, with his legs, because of the height, it's really hard, because no matter what you do, it's quite taxing. So belt squat worked for a long while. I took belt squat out, and now this prep belt squat's back in again. I found we've spoken a little bit about belt squat in the past, Steve, how it kind of throws people around a little bit, can go in programs and does change center of mass. And I think that's one of the big things with the accessories is the center of mass stuff. I found with Sam, his center of mass changed and belt squat kind of wasn't helping it. But then once that was sorted out, we could put belt squat back in again. Yeah.
I'm the same in just myself. Like, belt squat for me had to come out for a bit, just because I needed to because the belt squat, the way that it's like made, right? It's like, if you load it too much and, you know, don't apply band tension or anything like that, it just starts to make you just like fall back into it rather than be able to squat into it.
Yeah.
So for me, it made me, I guess, more hingier in my squat, which made things get harder over time, but my body wants to go there at the same time. So it's like, we had to take it away to get more squatty, and now I can introduce it again now, like the 2 blocks out from a competition prep, or like the block before the actual peak into Worlds.
Yeah.
Whereas when I left it in for so long, it's like my body went too far one way, and obviously I got beat up.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about with center of mass stuff when you program accessories, Danny? Do you take center of mass into consideration?
I mean, like in terms of center of mass, I like to address it using like constraints, like especially, although it's not an accessory, like in the main lifts, if we need to supplement with like secondary days, and if they're then doing too much, then we can shift the focus into accessories, right? So say, for example, let's use someone who is too forward on their squat and they can also not tolerate any more main lifting. We could give them something like front loaded, heel elevated, and building these constraints into like, no matter what they do, they're going to train through more flexion than if they weren't put under those constraints, right?
Definitely.
So similar to what Steve said, like that would be a negotiable that we'd find over time due to like inability to execute the lift at the way we want them to throughout their regular training.
Yeah, definitely. Are you of the mindset, once they've got their center of mass back, do you take that accessory out, or you just keep that in there as a non-negotiable?
I still like to keep it in there. It's like, because within my own model of thinking, the main thing is to get people stronger, right? That's what accessories are meant to do. And then fixing center of mass is like, I feel like it's more so a skill acquisition thing. So it'll always be there once it clicks, right? And then if the accessory is doing its thing, they're going to be able to practice that throughout the whole time they're doing it, and they're able to load it up over time, which ticks off both the goals. So it's worth putting it in there without getting it too crowded, because then if you're putting too many things in to like try and address those center mass issues, and it's just too much, then that can also generate fatigue similar to what like a main lift would do.
Definitely. Definitely. I think that's where the pendulum swung not long ago, where everyone was trying to make everyone lift perfectly. So all programs were centered around like fixing all the issues for the main lifts, but really if you know how to structure your accessories, that's what they do for you, type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
What about your program, Danny? Have you got any what's your negotiables and non-negotiables in your program that you run?
Mine specifically that Steve prescribes me.
Yeah, yours specifically.
From a strength perspective, like Steve likes to give me like belt squat AMRAPs, leg press AMRAPs, all those to get me to accumulate as much fatigue as I can, because like we said, squat may be too axially fatiguing. So therefore it's a very efficient way for us to accumulate volume that way.
Yep.
In terms of center of mass, he's given me tempo barbell RDLs as a way for me to get more forward in my hinging.
Yep.
Because I have a tendency to like be very tucked.
Yes.
Right. As well as on the flip side, he's also given me double heel elevated goblet squats to also get me to tuck, because at end range of flexion in the past, I've experienced some pain. So it's not so skill acquisition for the squat, but mainly just to like get range of motion at the bottom end for the hip.
That's
yeah.
So you can see there that he's programmed one hinging movement that will help your center of mass and one squatting movement that will help your center of mass. And if those two things are executed properly, you shouldn't have any issues.
Yeah, exactly. And they're very easy to implement into the program, because now, aside from the fact of me picking up, all right, he wants me to set up in this specific way, so I feel these specific things that I don't in my main lifts.
Yep.
Once they get ticked off, then I can load it and get stronger, and then it'll also build my total, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. Of course it will. I think that's one of the things where powerlifters or coaches, they need to continue to remember is if the lifter can stay under the barbell with squatting, you can squat it. It's when you can't stay under the bar, or that you're moving sideways or whatever too much, that things get harder. That doesn't mean that we need to make it perfect, but you just need to center of mass to be as good as possible at that time. What about you, Steve? We know hinging is a big one for you for your non-negotiables in your program. Is there any other movements other than hinging that has always been non-negotiable for you?
Well, hinging wasn't for such a long time.
Yeah.
Such a long time. It was like I like am a hingy kind of squatter, so I was like, we don't really need to supplement my program with more hinging because I'm already throwing myself there.
Yeah.
And then it was like, I was the other way. I needed to go the other way a bit more.
Yeah.
So I needed to get more forward, more tucked, I suppose. But then I started to get too far that way, and now it's like I need to go back the other way. So I was like, now we found this middle ground where it's like I got a lot of hinging, and I actually don't have as much that gets me forward, but I can find that I'm staying more forward in my squat because of what we did.
Yep.
So it was just like mixing it out throughout blocks and not just keeping it together all at once.
Yeah.
But other than that, like a lot of my programs just almost just getting like jacked strong.
Yeah, definitely. So then you've got those in your program, both your programs, you've got your non-negotiables, which are the stuff that helps your center of mass, and then the rest of it is just getting jacked.
Yeah, like I have that whole day on a Friday now where I bench and then I do about 7 or 8 upper body accessories and just slam myself.
Yep. Yeah. Do you think you guys will, given that you both have gained a lot of muscle from what you're doing, do you think that that's where some lifters go wrong, that they don't have enough muscle mass to start with, so their accessories, their main lifts are struggling because they're not pushing their accessories enough to the point where they can grow enough muscle to support?
100%. But if we look at Danny and myself in particular, like we both came from like backgrounds of training.
Yeah.
So we started with this higher baseline where it's not like these days we have people that are coming into the gym and then they start powerlifting straight off the bat. So they're starting to squat, bench, and deadlift. And it's like, you don't really need to do that. See, I got away with benching twice a week, squatting once a week. and not really even deadlifting, but like just training like a bodybuilder for so long. And then it wasn't after like a year or two until I found powerlifting and then got into powerlifting. I had a higher baseline than almost anyone around me. Got on the
Yeah.
platform, won my first competition, was like second overall and as a junior.
Yeah.
And it was because I had this huge baseline of, training like a bodybuilder for 2 years before that, and then only did like powerlifting specific for 6 months.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we kind of just said then, to contradict ourselves a little bit, is, Danny, at the start you said that you don't want to create fatigue with accessories, but then we just said that people don't push them enough. So what are some tips for you guys to give to lifters or coaches in general, so they know A, when to push, and B, when they might be pushing too far?
I think it comes from exercise selection itself and like the level that you've selected to like cap yourself, right? So aside from those things, you should be very well pushing accessories very, very hard, right? Because at the end of the day, it is to get you stronger, and you do need muscular tension in order to generate hypertrophy and build strength from there, right? So for those things like movement competency and things like that, like the non-negotiables, where like center of mass issues and like compensations are likely to happen, they're going to happen as it starts to get heavier, and you want to be careful with that, because you're going to reinforce patterns that you're trying to get out of in the first place. But for accessories that are purely meant to get you stronger, I'm very much of the mindset where once everything's set up, you just got to push.
Yep.
Because that's what it's there for.
Yeah. So that's kind of where communication would come in. So if you're coaching, I don't know about you guys, but I kind of like to prescribe the weight for RDLs. I'll just prescribe it, because otherwise I think that people aren't really, or lifters aren't really sure on how to progress it, or when to progress it, or what progression looks like for that movement. So that's kind of what, if it's a non-negotiable, it just gets prescribed.
Yeah.
And I think, keep going.
Specifically for like RDLs, right? We know that's an exercise that can almost be interchangeable with like a secondary day, because it's so valuable in how well you can load it. So I think like exercise selection in itself is a consideration there. Like if they don't need to do barbell RDLs and you want to have as an accessory just to train like center mass, you could do something like dumbbell, where it's like inherently load limited, right? So that's where I think like exercise selection plays a role in limiting people.
Yeah. What are some common mistakes in the way that programs are structured then to cause too much fatigue, or the feeling of being so dommy that you can't do your main movements properly?
I think that comes from data. Some people just get a lot more sore from working a certain muscle group more than the other. So if we look at like, say, volume landmarks from RP, like RP strength and their model, like some muscle groups are just more sensitive to the work done. So like larger muscle groups that can do more work per set are going to fatigue quicker, versus say something that's a small muscle group like arms, triceps, biceps. You can push it quite hard and the very next day you'll recover. And then you can just push again if you really wanted to, right? So it might be, I would say, one potential issue that people might run into, and I have in the past, is giving too much work on one day so that you're feeling DOMS for like 2 or 3 days after. But I find that quickly becomes a non-issue as the person starts to recover and they adapt to the program. And then once they tolerate it, it's like then you're fine, and they're getting stronger. So it ticks things off. I think it just comes to an initial down period. If they're coming from a place where it's like very specific, they're not doing a lot of work to increase in the baseline, that's where you might run into an issue.
What do you reckon, Steve?
Yeah, I agree. It's also like Danny said, like it depends on how much like the exercise that we're prescribing recruits as well. So if we talk about an RDL, there's a lot involved going there. That's why it can be interchangeable for a secondary day. If we think of something that's like a leg extension, right? It's completely different, but we can really just like target the quads. So it's about what we're trying to achieve out of an accessory.
Yep.
And also like how fatiguing is it going to be? how sensitive is this person to actual loading fatigue, like Danny spoke about earlier, and how sensitive are they to like machine work fatigue? Because they're two completely different things, really, because we're isolating so much on the machines. So we look at someone that fatigues really hard from like a barbell squat, a deadlift, or bench press, that person, but we know that they need more.
Yep.
We know they're not doing enough, so we need to give them more. We need to find a way. This is where we can come, this is where enter leg press, hack squat, pendulum, belt squat, or something like that to get more squatting volume in, but not actual load fatigue them. We're not putting each of those, if we think about them all together, like the hack squat, pendulum, maybe not so much belt squat, depending on the way that it's executed, and leg press, we're taking away the back. If we think about a competition squat, there's a lot of people that use their back, and their back assists when they competition squat because we're low bar squatting.
Yeah, definitely.
But we need more squatting volume. That is heavy in their program.
Definitely. Yeah, that's why I think I found that once I took belt squat out with Sam, we just didn't have a volume that would help.
Yeah, but he needs it.
Yeah.
But you can't put it on a fucking barbell because it's just too much.
Yeah, I think I tried like 1 week of Hatfields with him, and I was like, nah, this is not going to work. And took it out straight away. There was way too much axial loading on it.
Yeah, it's only good if you don't have the belt squat, right? Like this is kind of like a last resort.
Yeah, that was the problem though. Belt squat was throwing him backwards, so I was like, okay, how can I get this guy forwards? But it was just, at the end of the day, it's just better hinging mechanics, anyways. That's all it was. Okay, let's talk about we've talked about tiering the accessories a bit. We've talked about negotiables and non-negotiables and how to structure throughout a micro. Let's talk about off-season and on-season. So I think this is a really good topic because even though we should be training like we're going towards a competition all the time with intent and things like that, there is an off-season and there is an on-season for powerlifting when it comes to accessories a little bit. How do you guys structure that with your accessories for off season first?
You can get more variability with your movements. So earlier I touched on like the movements that we miss out on are like vertical pulling, horizontal pulling, vertical pressing. Those can come back in. More isolated movements that train muscle groups that we tend to neglect in powerlifting, so like the back, shoulders, biceps, if you really need to, like those can all come back in. Just to build a bigger baseline, build more muscle over time. Because once you get into like in season or like peaking, right, like recovery demands and allocating that properly is much more important than just general hypertrophy. Right. So the goals get more targeted over time, but the further you are from competition, the more general you can be, and the goal can be to just build as much muscle as possible. Right. So therefore, intensity across accessories, you can assume to be higher. Exercise selection can be more demanding, so more fatiguing. Pushing higher frequency on things that are going to be fatiguing. So I think like belt squats, dips for your triceps. Some people like to do like weighted pull-ups, which like if we think about it from like a fatigue perspective is like it's pretty high, generates a lot of fatigue as a byproduct, not just on the lats, but like like on your arms, forearms, lower back if you're going to arch, right? Like it doesn't seem like a good exercise, but like if there is going to be a preference to put it in, you'd put it in pretty early in like an off season.
Do you have anything to add to that, Steve?
No, I agree. And it's just like you can output a lot more on your accessories in an off season, and then when we get to like the peaking phase or something, that's where we'll start to dial things down a bit and really be able to, I guess, express what we've done through our accessories and that kind of volume work that you're probably doing in an off season, then in that peaking block.
What does dialing down mean? Because I think like anything, programming is on a spectrum. So, it's really hard. Things go wrong when you swing really well one way or when you swing really well like the other way, right? So when it comes to off season, like that's when you're structuring your things like your AMRAPs and things like that. Is that what you're talking about? So your AMRAPs, drop sets, all that shit. How do you change that in a peaking block so someone doesn't detrain, or so someone's still getting the stimulus that they need? What are some tips that you can do?
You can save those advanced techniques, like you said, so like AMRAPs, drop sets, Maya reps, all that can be done up until, let's say, the last block before you start to peak. And arguably, like it can even go into, say, the first half of a peaking block before you dramatically drop it off. Just depends how you want to taper it, right? But if we're looking to maximize performance on a competition day, it'd be likely that you'll reduce the amount of workload, whether that's like getting rid of the advanced technique or like prescribing reps that are dropping over time without completely eliminating it. Because like you said, if you swing in one direction and then swing the other way too much, like it creates too much uncertainty. So like slowly bringing the reps down over time can be beneficial, because you'd also be able to still load it up over time. So by the time you get to the end of a taper or the end of a block, you have something to taper from as well. It's not just like completely eliminated.
Yep. So you can play with rep ranges instead.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have anything to add to that one, Steve?
Yeah, I agree. And it's like what we said earlier, we got like the non-negotiable stuff where someone will need X amount of sets of hinging per week or something like that, or X amount of sets to keep them forward or something. That can't really change in a peak, because they're literally there to make sure that their competition lifts perform better.
Yeah.
But that won't change. But it's like the other stuff, like maybe some sort of rowing movements or pull down movements or something. Another thing on like weighted pull up. So you said, Danny, like, I don't mind them, but like I found that when the seat broke here in the lat pull down, that no one can just execute a lat pull down properly until you take the seat out. Because we took the seat that sits above the legs. As soon as like that broke and we had to take that out and we just put a seat down, the load that everyone was doing dropped like fucking 5 or 6 plates, and it becomes harder than a way just a normal pull up. And you got to actually, like, next time you're in the gym and you do a lat pull down, don't use the seat. Put up as high as possible and just hold your body down and pull down with that.
Oh God.
It's fucking hard.
Yeah, man. And we're not strong. We're not strong at vertical pulling. We don't need it in the program. You need a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever take, like, let's say you're in a peaking block, right? Do you guys ever take full accessories out?
Yeah, I do. No. Like towards the very, very end, like let's say 2 weeks out. And like Steve said, like things like vertical pulling, or like I said, like vertical pulling, things that are very unspecific and then very general, like lateral pull downs, lat raises, sorry. Like things that seem like they're just there for bodybuilding reasons. That's when I might take it out. But it's super, super close to training. And if I do that, I'm expecting recovery to improve on something like a bench press. That's the only reason why I take it out. If not, I'm similar to Steve, where I'll just like hold it in till the very end and then just cut them out the last week for like tapering effects.
I take it out like the last week. I'll drop sets though. I'll drop it down to like 1 or 2 sets, just because I'm probably increasing, say bench press volume or squat volume or something. So I start to take away a bit from the accessories, because I know that there's going to be more fatigue induced from that. So I'll drop, like, maybe if we're doing like 3 or 4 sets on the belt squat, I'll drop that down to 2 or something, and then I'm adding to the comp specific lift.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a big thing to point out there, that you're playing with accessories, but don't play with them too early.
Yeah.
Leave them in there, especially if someone can handle it. Leave them in there till the end. Like, you don't want to take them out too early. It just changes too many things. Yeah.
To add to that as well, like all the accessories that you would put into a program should be safe enough so that once fatigue is there, you can probably still perform it like in a way that's safe and manageable even under fatigue. So there's no reason why you would take it out until the very end.
Yep, definitely. Or start to control it, you know. You guys both would have your accessories that you just like to go ham on. I see Steve going ham on dips weekly, so that kind of needs to be controlled. How close to competition do you guys control that out?
Honestly, as an athlete, like I push everything. So like all the accessories that Steve puts in, like I just want to like keep adding more load week to week.
Yep.
But like the coach in me says like, oh, you got to control it so the main lifts can start to express themselves. But honestly, if everything is still managing to perform, like you don't need to like go into a session and say, I'm going to hold back on accessories. Unless, for example, like an emergency pops up or like fatigue is extremely high for whatever reason outside of like training circumstances and you need the recovery demands, then that's where you may be able to dial it down because it's not a priority to maximize progress on those things. That's where it might be useful. But like if you're recovering properly, like sleep's good, nutrition's good, like it's there to set you up for the future. So you shouldn't really hold back.
Yeah. We will touch on recovery. So if an athlete isn't, or your athlete isn't recovering from the accessories that you're giving them or complaining about DOMs a lot, what's your communication with them? What are you smiling at?
Toughen up.
Yeah.
I just try and understand from their point of view because I know athlete to athlete, when I'm talking to someone, I can struggle when people tell me that kind of stuff because like Danny said, Danny and I are similar as athletes where we push I increase the load on everything that I do every single week to the point where it's like sometimes I'm just adding like a little 1.25 to my dips or something. I'm adding that to my dips. So I'm like progressing everything every single week. Like it doesn't matter what it is. That's why I write everything down in a book. So I know exactly how much I've done. I'll add another plate. If I'm not adding another plate to all the sets of an accessory that I'm doing it to at least one set. So it's always going up. I'm always doing more. Like progressive overload is, how we determine progress, right?
Yep.
So, and that's the same with accessories. It's not just the same with the main list. So when someone says to me, they're feeling DOMs, it's like, well, I try and understand from their point of view why this might be happening. Is there other things, the nutrition not on check, sleep not in check, or the external variables, they checked off, or like are they maybe going too hard, or are they just not used to training hard? And like as Danny touched on earlier, like as the program kind of goes on and as there's someone's working with you for longer, adaptations take place, recovery starts to get a bit higher, and they start to just feel more recovered. So it might be early on that this starts to happen, or when you've introduced a new accessory, and then slowly it becomes better and better over time. So I kind of just leave it for a bit, and I'll just be like, this is on purpose. Sometimes I'll say, even though it's unexpected, I'll say this is meant to be this way. It's kind of expected.
Yep.
Even if in my mind I'm like, fuck, I don't actually know particularly why this is happening based on this certain person, but I'll still be like, this is expected. Let's see how it is in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. To add to that, it's like when it's very novel, that's when you experience the soreness, right? But like if it's out of nowhere, like say you've kept accessories the same for a very long time, and like for some odd reason, it's just this one occasion where they might be feeling sore. Like it's not particularly an issue either. Like soreness isn't really going to pull back. Like there's a difference between like pain from injury and then pain from soreness, and pain from soreness from that perspective is a good thing. Like that means you're training hard.
Yeah. It's still like, I know a lot of people say like, oh, you don't want to train until you're sore or anything like that. Like that doesn't mean that you're progressing, or that doesn't mean that you're training hard, but it's still an indicator.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point, like you don't add so many accessories onto one day where you say that soreness lasts for the whole week. It's like you'll feel it for a day or two. And compared to like, let's say methods that like bodybuilding methods were like very specific on one target muscle for a week and you can't feel it for a whole week. It's very different to that. Like 2 days of soreness isn't bad.
Yeah.
But I fucking love being sore too. So
Yeah, exactly. It's good. Means you trained hard.
Yeah.
yeah.
So if there's any lifters out there that aren't training their accessory hard enough because they're worried that it's going to interfere into their bench press or squat and they're not near a competition, you probably need to train harder.
Yeah. Worry
Yeah.
about it when you're in a peak.
Worry about it when you're in a peak for sure. Okay, so one more thing before we finish. Now, for the novel, so we've got different types of lifters that will do anything over and over and over again. They don't care about monotony. They don't care about doing the same thing for years on end, whereas we've got others that complain about being bored. When do you change your accessories and why do you change your accessories? And I'm not talking about the non-negotiables, I'm talking about the negotiables.
Negotiables being things where it's more so like to supplement the main lifts, like for competency reasons.
So like your dumbbell pressing, dips,
Yeah, got you.
general leg training. Like,
Yeah.
do you guys change them block to block, or do you leave them in until the lifter says, "I'm bored, I would like a change"?
Yeah, I leave it in on an as needed basis. So like if it's loadable and they're still progressing, like it's doing its job, and the limiting factor then just becomes enthusiasm, right? Which is worth acknowledging. So then once that happens, then you can change it to something where if it was working really well, you might want something that's similar in how well you load it. So for example, like straight bar tricep push down, for example. I've had someone because of like to give context, this one particular person I had couldn't bench properly and therefore was like, all right, let's kind of save what we can by just doing isolated movements as frequently as I can. Right.
Yep.
So it was like tricep push downs 3 days a week. Right. And that would be pretty boring, but it did its job. And then he was like, once he was able to bench again, it was like, hey, like I've been doing this for a long time. I don't really want to be tricep push downing 3 days a week anymore. So it's like
push down specialist.
yeah, man, pretty much. And it was like, okay, then we have the option to progress in like complexity. So like weighted dips became a viable solution. But then other options could have also been like anything else really that would have isolated the tricep, like close grip bench, now that was available, single arm tricep push down, if that wasn't as monotonous, like a tiny tweak that would still target the same thing would have done its job.
Yep. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same with Danny on that. And then it's also like, okay, if someone needs the hinging, like I said earlier, or something that is non-negotiable, we can find a different way to do it, right? We can change like to a single leg RDL or a B stance RDL or wall reference RDL. We can just change up the constraint and the way that we're doing it, because it is, especially someone needs like 20 sets or something stupid of hinging. If you notice, like me, I do a lot of hinging, but I try and make it different every fucking time because I don't want to do the same thing each time. So one's like one's like a bilateral dumbbell, one's like a barbell, one's B stance, and one's like a wall reference. Like I just change it around the whole way.
Yeah.
I don't want to do the same thing each time. So it's just finding things that get the same effect, but also are different for the athlete, because as Danny said, like the enthusiasm factor will disappear. And someone doesn't want to be doing tricep push downs the exact same way 3 times a week.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, some people do, they don't care, but
But even so, for those people, it's like they're gonna hit a point where like, hey, I'm a little bored. It's been a year of 3 days tricep push downs. Like, can we do something else? At that point, it's like, yeah, like for sure, you can.
Yeah,
There's so many
but it's
other
also
things
like
you
a
can
lot of athletes will come to you. They'll be like, "Hey, man, like I don't really enjoy this. Can we change it?" And it's most of the time it's something that's really easy to change. Just change like the constraint, or say if someone's doing like a dumbbell press, and like, I don't like dumbbell presses, so we just change it to a machine press or something. That's could even be better because of the the stability of the machine.
do.
Yeah. Definitely. All right. Okay. I think we'll wrap it up there. I think the big rocks that we went through is don't be scared of causing fatigue if you're in the off season. Push your accessories if you're in the off season. When you're on the on season, understand your program, what you can and you can't push, and don't take them out too early. Anything else?
No,
Push your
that's
accessories.
about it.
What's your accessories?
Push your accessories. Train like a bodybuilder.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.